Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 228, recorded October 25th, 2019. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today as always is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about, as we have the last week and as we are going to for the next couple of weeks, Mr. Robot and The Good Place. In particular, we're going to be talking about episode 3 of season 4 of Mr. Robot, titled Forbidden, and episode 5 of season 4 of The Good Place, titled Employee of the Bearimy.
Yes.
Which is a nice little throwback to a previous joke.
Because that's how they measure time in The Good Place.
Jeremy Bearimy.
It's not a straight line, it's a Jeremy Bearimy. Yeah.
So it's a nice little throwback to that. That was funny. But we're going to start things off with Mr. Robot, 403 Forbidden. So this episode got us a new perspective on White Rose. We got to kind of see White Rose's origin in a sense.
Yes.
We saw White Rose as just a Chinese diplomat working alongside IBM and another Chinese diplomat.
Not working alongside IBM, actually.
But working to make a deal with IBM. Where basically, they were planning to steal the intellectual property.
Yeah, I love that because, they're speaking Chinese, and White Rose has a translator. The IBM guy says, "We can't wait to do business with you," and then White Rose says in Chinese, "I can't wait to steal your intellectual property."
Yeah.
It was a good scene.
So you get to see them doing that. This is White Rose before he's White Rose, before he's found his power, before he's started Deus, everything like that. So you see him as kind of just this ambitious Chinese bureaucrat, and he's got this friend that's working with him as like a translator. You find out they're more than friends. They're in a relationship, and they're Chinese. They're from mainland China during the 80s. That kind of relationship is just not accepted. It's forbidden.
So White Rose
it's 403 forbidden.
Yeah, it's forbidden. White Rose's lover wants to escape China and live in the U.S. where they could at least, it's not like the U.S. at that period was accepting of homosexuality, but it certainly was not illegal in the United States.
Yeah, certainly better than
Certainly
China.
better than China. So he wants to escape China and...
Well, not really even escape. The idea is that they're going to do so well on this deal that White Rose will become the U.S. ambassador.
Right. But he wants to escape China.
And then they'll be located in
He only
Europe.
cares about the ambassadorship because he wants to get out of China. So it is escaping. He wants to escape China.
Well, they're still going to be they'd still be Chinese citizens working for the Chinese government. They're just would be working in the ambassador's office instead of
okay, but
China,
the general idea.
Yeah, I get what you mean. He just wants to live in America where they can be more free to be themselves. They're only themselves behind closed doors, and you get little peaks in their relationship. So, right after they have this meeting, the translator goes on a drinking thing with some of the people at IBM. White Rose says he doesn't want to go.
This is a cool shot, too, because if you notice, the way they do it, because he says that he's going to be gone for, a few minutes, and then they have the shot that shows, the passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows it goes from day to night. Again, it's a really neat shot that they did for that.
Yeah, and then he kind of comes back stumbling back into the room, exhausted and drunk. And when he opens up the door, White Rose is standing in the room in a white gown.
Yes.
And at this point, they were gay lovers, but White Rose hadn't expressed herself as being trans.
Right.
Only as, a gay man.
Yeah.
So this is, his time to, open up to his lover about this aspect of him. And he's, really, or she's really, kind of nervous about it and saying, oh, I guess I'm just a man in a dress or something. And
she's revealing herself for the first time.
Yeah.
To somebody else.
And her lover's like, no, I was going to say that you're beautiful. And so you can see kind of this relationship between them. It's actually like a really sweet relationship.
Right. Really nice.
Very unlike what you'd expect from White Rose. So they have this moment, and then you see like a little bit later on in the episode, you see like a time later in which they're at like a wedding.
He's getting married.
The translator is.
Yeah, he's being forced into a marriage by his father, and he doesn't want to go through with it.
And he's freaking out about it, and he's like, why didn't we just get the ambassadorship, like, with everything you did? And White Rose is like, I did too good, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They made me the offer as an undersecretary for the government, which is much more powerful position in the government. But it's not an ambassadorship to the United States, which means they have to stay in China, which means they have to continue to live a lie.
Right.
And White Rose's lover here is having a really hard time dealing with that, because he doesn't care about power or anything. He just wants to be
right
with White Rose and be free to be open about who he is.
Right, exactly.
And that becomes clear that that's like never going to happen. White Rose is like, I'll make us a world that's better, but that's not registering.
White Rose is choosing power over the relationship, basically.
Yeah, or he's like putting off the relationship to establish power.
To establish power, yeah. Either way.
Yeah, and you know, that White Rose's lover does not like this, but kind of like shines him on as like, yes, okay, I'll go with this. I'll go through with this sham wedding. I'll do it, everything. And as White Rose is leaving the room...
you're missing an important part, because White Rose tells him to have patience.
Yeah.
To have patience, everything will work out. And that is key. That line is key.
As White Rose is about to leave the room, his lover calls back to him, and White Rose turns around and his lover slits his own throat.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of a beautiful shot, because you have these white roses on this table, and then after he slits his throat, it like pans around and you see the blood splatter where it's like red roses.
Yeah, where red roses.
Around where he had slit his throat.
Because the roses were white. And they're red from his blood, so that's a little symbolic imagery for you. But this is told within the context of, because in the present day, you know, White Rose is talking to one of her underlings. White Rose is talking to one of her underlings, the woman from like the first episode, and basically, well, she's telling White Rose that, you know, like, oh, like it's gonna take time to set everything up to get like everybody, you know, into the meeting. You know, this is just a trick by, you know, they know that Elliot's up to something, you know, and they suspect that Price is working with Elliot now and all this. And she's saying it's going to take some time. You're going to need to have...
She also brings up, like, the thing with Jake Busey's character from the last episode.
She also brings that up.
He was meeting somebody, and it was, like, clandestine, and then Philip Price asking for this meeting with all of the members of Deus, and how it's, like, not coincidence.
And basically, she says to White Rose, she says something like it's gonna take patience, and then that's what triggers it, because then, like, after that line, that's when we get it flashes back to the incident in China, where her lover kills himself, and then it goes back to the present, and the reason the line of patience, because that's what she told her lover, to have patience, and then he killed himself, so she remembers that, and then when it flashes back to the present, you see White Rose, and, you know, she looks angrier than ever, and she's like, no, fuck that, we're gonna do it now, you know?
we're gonna call this meeting tomorrow.
We're gonna call this meeting tomorrow.
So we're gonna push up the timetable by like a huge amount. Yeah, tomorrow, which is, by the way, Christmas.
Yes.
Because this is all happening on Christmas Eve. This whole episode takes place on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, this whole episode takes place on Christmas Eve. So, they're gonna do it on Christmas, and she's just like, that's gonna be impossible.
And he's like, no, this is going to happen because I'm powerful enough to say that it's going to happen and everybody else is going to fall into line. And then she explains kind of her reasoning for doing it, for setting it for tomorrow, isn't like, you know, just stubborn obstinance or anything. It's because she also realizes that this is like a plot against them. But she knows that one way that they can overcome that is by disrupting the plan.
Yeah, by disrupting their timeline.
They're trying to throw, like, Elliot and Philip Price are trying to throw, like, a wrench in White Rose's plan by making this meeting happen and bringing everybody in Deus together. And she's throwing a wrench in their plan by, like, making the meeting happen so soon that they're not on the timetable to do what they want to do.
And the one woman there, White Rose's underling, she's just, like, replying to White Rose, and she's like, oh, but, you know, like, so White Rose is like, oh, we're just gonna going to let Philip quit and we're going to hold the meeting. And then she's like, but in the meantime, until you decide who's going to run E-Corp before you decide CEO. And White Rose is like, oh, well, Tyrell can run E-Corp.
Yeah, she said call him up and tell him that the offer's from me.
Yeah, call him up, tell him the offer's from me.
So this is kind of White Rose's plan, her origin story in a sense.
Yes.
And we kind of see now there's this wrench being thrown at Elliot's plan that he doesn't know yet at this point in the episode, obviously, because it's at that point in the episode.
Yeah. Elliot's not psychic.
So Elliot's story, before we get to the main part of his story, earlier in the day, he has an encounter with his old therapist.
Mm-hmm, yes.
His old therapist, Krista, who he'd had some kind of bad history with.
That's pretty good.
When you look in the last season.
That's putting it mild. But yeah.
Yeah, he hacked her, boyfriend, found out something unsavory about her boyfriend, caused that, did a bunch of stuff basically to break their trust forever. And then Mr. Robot, that personality exposed himself to her and frightened her.
Yes.
In the last season. So he just encounters her on the street and he wants to say thank you to her and say that he took her advice and things are getting better for her. He just wants to be nice and say, I'm sorry for everything that happened. Thank you for what you said to me. I took your advice. Things are working out better for me. That's all he wants to say to her.
Get the fuck away from me.
She is not having it. She's like, yeah, get the fuck away from me. I'm scared of you. I don't want you near me. I'm going to call the police if you come by me. This deeply hurts Elliot.
Yes.
Because he wanted to do right. He knew that he had caused problems, but he wanted to do right and basically tell her things are back on track, and even after she says all that, he's like, I'm not asking to be your patient again. I just wanted you to know that I'm doing better, and then, she's unmoved by that.
Yeah, she's unmoved.
They part ways. Elliot's a little bit shaken, but you see somebody was following Elliot.
Yes.
And then you end up seeing who this is. It's one of Vera's men.
Yeah, later we find out it's one of Vera's men. Towards the end of the episode, we find out that it was one of Vera's
But
men.
we'll cover this now just so we can get to the better stuff later.
Okay. The better stuff.
There's a scene we see Vera working in the back of a restaurant or a butcher shop or something. And he has, people coming in and you see that he's packing drugs into
kids coming in. Not just people, but kids.
Yeah, and he's packing drugs into chicken carcasses basically, and they're wrapping them up, packing drugs in them, and the kids are moving those around. They're acting as the mules to transport the drugs.
Right.
And so this guy that was spying on Elliot walks in as well and starts talking to Vera, and he doesn't understand why Vera's so obsessed with Elliot. And Elliot's Vera's like, Elliot's a genius, and the guy's like, well, why don't you just force him to do it, at gunpoint, force him to do it. And Vera's like, I don't want him to be a hired gun, I want him to be my partner. So Vera's obsessed with Elliot, basically. Mainly because of how Elliot was able to get Vera out of prison and stuff, and he saw how capable Elliot is. And this is since we saw him last season, Vera wants Elliot, he wants Elliot to be his, not even his soldier, but like I said, his partner. He wants it, he sees potential there. He's I can control this whole city if I have Elliot, And so he's desperate to have Elliot, so he's going over the stuff, he's trying to get details from the guy. The guy isn't really competent in that area. He's all, what was his facial expression like? What was he doing here? And the guy just has nothing. He's all, did you at least tape it? So he goes through and he gets some pictures and he's looking at it and he's seeing it and one of the kids is still in the room.
I love the line that Vera gets, because he's giving them Vera answers and Vera's just details. The devil's in that shit.
Yeah. But he shows the pictures to the kid and he's like, what do you see here? And the kid points out that Elliot's hurt because his mom, or not his mom, but his therapist scolded him. And the kid knows that because that's how he feels when his mom scolds him. So now you have this weakness to this area that Vera can exploit. He's like, she knows something and I can use that. And that's the information I needed. And he quickly shoots his guy in the leg.
Yeah, he shoots the guy in his leg and he's like, how come this little kid can see this and you couldn't? It's basically, what am I paying you for? And he kills him.
Yeah, and just shoots him in the head and that's it. Ends him off. So we can see kind of Vera's story. We knew he was coming into play, and now we kind of see how he's going to fit into the picture, at least to some extent. I'm sure at some point Elliot's going to end up using him.
Well, he explains, like Vera's explained, like he wants to recruit Elliot for his operation, right?
Yeah, which just kind of gives us an idea that Elliot's going to probably end up using Vera as a source of muscle at some point.
Right, yeah, that seems like it.
Elliot's going to manipulate this into his advantage at some point. That's why Vera's here in the season. Next up we have was kind of like I guess the dominant story of the episode, which is, it's Christmas Eve and Elliot and Darlene are talking and they have this asset at the bank that they want to exploit, this person that they need to get information from. They need to get into her account. And Darlene's going to go and do it, but Elliot doesn't let her. At first, he tries to explain it. He has Mr. Robot try to explain it to her, which again, they did that cool thing where he's like, why don't you explain it to her? And then Mr. Robot steps forward and starts talking to her. And it's like we're seeing it all from Elliot's perspective, but obviously Darlene is seeing Elliot doing all of this rather than just like the half of it.
Right.
But eventually, like, she turns down Mr. Robot and keeps walking to go, and Elliot becomes very forceful about it and says, like, no, you are not going. He says, I should have never opened my door when you came knocking. Like, meaning, I think, back before season 1 with the whole F Society thing.
Yeah, with the whole F Society thing.
Which really hurts Darlene, but, Elliot, he doesn't want her involved in that, and so he takes off. Elliot's kind of keeping people at a distance this season.
He is keeping people at a distance to the point where even Mr. Robot's like, you gotta trust somebody,
Yeah. So this woman she's supposed to go on a date. This woman that's this asset that they're trying to exploit. She's going to be going on a date. So they break into her house and they try to get into her system, but they can't because she's got a key. She's got an encrypted key.
Yeah, like literally an encrypted, like USB key that she keeps on her person.
Yeah, and Elliot's like, well, there's no way she's not going to have this on her person. He basically profiles her. He says, like, she's a parent. She's trying to do this on her own. Everything that he's seeing in her apartment.
He finds a bottle of Oxy.
From his research. Yeah, all of it tells him that she's somebody that this job is too important for her to mess around.
Right.
That she'll be keeping this key on her at all time. Then after he says that, he finds the bottle of Oxy and realizes she's an addict. And this becomes like a play as well. And basically what they end up doing is they decide that they're going to do some social engineering on her in order to get what they need.
Yes.
So they go, I'm not sure, was there a scene earlier where he maybe messed up the guy so that the guy was confused about when the date was or something? Did they show something?
No, I don't remember that.
I think it's kind of understood though that he did something to delay the guy showing up.
But they go there, and Elliot basically decides he's going to use this again. He's going to blackmail her and get that key.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Robot's trying to talk him out of it, saying, I don't think that's the correct approach here. Mr. Robot's basically saying, I don't think that's the correct approach, and Elliot's not having it.
Yeah. So Elliot approaches her to blackmail her, and right when he's about to, Mr. Robot interrupts him.
Yes.
And kind of smooth talks her instead.
Right, exactly.
And the idea is we're going to play a social game on her instead of blackmailing her. We're going to get into her head and get into kind of a relationship with her and open up the opportunity to steal this key.
Right, exactly.
And so Elliot's kind of confused about doing this, but Mr. Robot is kind of guiding him through it. So it's kind of interesting watching Mr. Robot flirt with her and Elliot kind of looking at him kind of confused, knowing that that's actually Elliot saying all that to her. They do cool stuff like that, like we've already mentioned before with the Darlene scene, to show the way the personalities work in tandem. But he kind of ends up getting a pretty good connection with her, and there's some kind of real feelings kind of in there as well. The guy shows up that was supposed to be her date for the night, and at that point, the two of them were like, oh yeah, you must be thinking of the wrong person, that's not me. And she's gonna take off and go, but then Elliot kind of runs out. And
Elliot does something
makes out
spontaneous and not Elliot.
Yeah.
To get this key. He runs out there and he makes out with her.
And they end up going back to her place and having sex.
Mm-hmm.
And then Elliot steals the key while she's asleep.
Something unexpected happens, which they make a genuine connection,
mm-hmm.
which was not on Elliot's agenda.
Yeah, after he gets the information on the key over to Darlene so that she can use it to get into the account, she comes to like the bathroom door where he is, and he's kind of stumbling, trying to like hide what he was doing. And so he's just saying, oh, he was looking for aspirin.
Yeah.
Then when she comes in, like he accidentally like knocks over like her pill bottle that he had found before, the OxyContin. And, she's like, oh, it's not what you think or something. And they end up having this genuine moment of connection where they're kind of sharing kind of stories with each other. And she's talking about how she had become addicted. We had a whole scene before where they had talked about like, you know, his mom just dying recently and how she had lost her mom as well and how she had made her dad miserable. But then like at this moment, she said, remember how I told you that I made my dad miserable? Well, this is how I did it.
Yeah.
And she's shown like the bottle of OxyContin, and she said, I wrecked it so much. She pulls out a razor blade from the bottle.
Yeah.
And she says that I put this here as a reminder. Like I don't use OxyContin, but I leave it there with the razor blade inside the bottle as a reminder that if I take this, I might as well just kill myself.
So we find out that if Elliot did go ahead with the blackmail approach, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, basically. Like this is something that worked. And it also worked in a different way because Elliot's, like we said, has been keeping people at arm's length this whole season. And this is like the first time he's kind of opened up and he's made this connection.
First time he's opened up and kind of let somebody in.
Yes.
Because his conversation with her, you know, he doesn't lie to her or try to make up a fake persona or anything. Like.
Yeah, he obfuscates some details.
Yeah, he obfuscates some details where nothing he says is an outright lie.
Yeah. He has a genuine connection with this woman, and he leaves, and he's kind of, you know, he's a little bit happy, and he's even, but as he's returning home, he realizes he's being followed, and, you know, making the assumption that it's a dark army.
Yes, it's the dark army. But, like, you don't even have to make the assumption, it basically is. Yeah. Yeah,
until we find out next week it's somebody else.
Yeah, it's somebody else, right? So yeah, like, he's being followed, and basically, this robot asks, you know, Elliot what they're gonna do, and Elliot's just like, I'm not gonna do nothing, I'm gonna just go home and act normal, like we're not involved in anything. You know, thinking that they don't know at this point, so.
Basically, it's like, if I expose myself to being paranoid about something, then I'm showing that I'm doing something.
Right, exactly.
But if I just act like, you know, like I just don't care because, well, why would I care? Like I'm not doing anything. Then that's gonna throw suspicion off of me.
Right, exactly.
So he's going home, but then when he gets to his door, he sees his door's been broken into.
Yeah, his apartment's been broken
His
into.
apartment.
Like, literally, like, the door had been forced open, you know?
Yeah. And Mr. Robot's like, we can't go in there. The Dark Army's in there. And Elliot's like, well, the Dark Army's out there, too.
Mr. Robot had this monologue at the beginning of the episode about Russian roulette and, like, how many chances, like, they've taken, and kind of pondering, like, oh, what's the last chance? What's the one time where the bullet's going to be in the chamber? And then it kind of comes back around to this, at this point when he sees the door. Like he says to the viewer, he's like, is this it? Is this the one with the bullet in the chamber? You know, it's like, Elliot's just like, I'm gonna go in there, and Mr. Robot's like, I don't think that's a good idea.
But yeah, you know, Elliot has the point of like, it doesn't matter if the Dark Army's inside my apartment because we know they're outside already.
Right.
So it's not like I'm gonna escape them by going like, oh, they're in my apartment, I better head downstairs. It's like, well, then they'll grab him there.
Yeah, they'll grab him there. There's really nowhere he can go.
So he's like, I'm just gonna go into my apartment as if there's no problem. And he goes in there, and right inside there is Tyrell Willick, and he looks at Elliot and he says, well, golly gee willikers, Elliot, it's been ages.
No, it's Tyrell Willick. He wants to break the news to Elliot, you know, because basically, first thing he says is they're making me CEO, what are we gonna do? And Elliot's is like, basically, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, he keeps making gestures to him, and it's like Tyrell's like too simple.
Yeah, is not reading his gestures. He doesn't get what's
That's
going
why I
on.
said, like, golly gee willikers, you know, like, because that's basically how Tyrell's acting at the scene. And Elliot's like kind of waving him like, no, don't say it. And finally Elliot grabs like a notepad and writes, they're listening.
Yeah, they're listening.
And the camera kind of just shows outside and pans down to that truck that was following him.
And they are indeed listening.
Yes. So Tyrell just basically, you know, put his foot in both of their mouths.
Yeah, so now we're going to have to see how that plays out next week.
That was the end of the episode. So yeah, it's continuing on. I'm guessing next week's episode is Christmas Day.
Yeah, it has to be, right? Unless it just continues on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, like late at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Christmas is coming like winter before it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting that this is like this Christmas special because besides them mentioning that it's Christmas time and besides like the one scene like last week where White Rose like threw down the giant Christmas tree, like nothing really feels all that Christmassy around.
No, it doesn't.
If they didn't keep saying it was Christmas, you wouldn't think it, you know?
Right.
But it's cool the way that they didn't necessarily do a good job in presenting that.
I don't know. Like, it's more realistic, right? If nobody told you it was Christmas, would it feel like Christmas?
I don't know, like there's,
especially where you're at. Nobody said shit.
hey, there's no snow, but like, you know, hey, there'll be things that'll be decorated a certain way.
Yeah.
Certain kind of music playing. You know, like, I don't necessarily think they did a really great job of establishing that, but what they have done is in the narrative itself, like writing around like kind of these bittersweet kind of themes that you get in Christmas specials.
Right.
Like Elliot connecting with this woman on Christmas Eve, you know, like that kind of stuff is like, that's what makes it feel like Christmassy and like a Christmas special versus like the actual Christmas seasonal stuff, you know? So, yeah, I'm excited about next week's episode and the rest of the season. We're 3 down. The most famous air message of all is next week. 404 not found. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll definitely be fun.
We'll have a dinosaur in that episode, right? Because when you get a 404 on Google,
yeah,
you have that dinosaur minigame.
On Google, yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be this whole next episode will be a dinosaur minigame. If they had Alf, you know, anything could happen. Once you have Alf on the show, it's like dinosaur showing up in Mr. Robot. Doesn't sound impossible anymore. But, yeah, so that's Mr. Robot for this week. Now it's on to our next show discussion, which is The Good Place. We're talking about Season 4, Episode 5, Employee of the Bearimy.
Employee of the Bearimy. Yeah, this is good. This is a very plot-heavy episode. Not so much, I guess you could say it's a Tahani episode. It's not so much focused on one character this time, though.
Yeah, Tahani's got kind of one of the main plots, and then the other main plot has got to be, with Michael and, Jason.
Michael and Jason, yeah, which is great because the episode opens with basically the fake Michael and Janet in Bad Place jail.
Mm-hmm.
Vicky, who was fake Eleanor,
is kind of using Vicky is using Janet to try to test off her Michael impression to see if she's doing it right. But she keeps doing like these evil maniacal laughs.
Right.
Every time she's gonna laugh and they keep going like, Michael doesn't laugh like that. And then she keeps going even more over the top. And it's like, you're getting colder. And she's like, I know, what? I don't know why I'm doing that. Just can't help herself from going all evil on her laughs.
So basically, after we have the scene with Vicky and Janet and Sean, we cut to Michael and Jason on the handrail to the Bad Place to rescue Janet.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all dressed up, and Michael says he has a plan. And he gives Jason his memories back, which is funny because he gives Jason his memories back, and then he's like, "What do you remember?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember the last time I was in the Bad Place. I took a Molotov cocktail and I threw it at the demons." And then Michael is like, "Yeah, all those memories, and I was afraid that was going to be your one takeaway."
He's like trying to tell Jason, like, this is, you need to learn impulse control. Yeah, you need even if we're in need, you know, like, don't resort to that right away. Like, that's not what we need to do.
Yeah.
It would disrupt the plan.
It would disrupt the plan.
They get to the Bad Place and there's like a whole convention going on.
It's funny too because like right after that, like Jason says, "Oh, can you give me my memories back again? I forgot them all."
But yeah, so now they're going to the Bad Place, and there's like a convention going on. A Bad Place convention where...
I forgot what they call this. It's like Torture Con?
All I know is that Sean is giving like a keynote about torture methods.
Yeah, he's giving a keynote about torture methods.
The best one, I think, is where he said, like, you know, butthole spiders are great and all, but...
Yeah, butthole spiders...
Eventually they get used to them, and the spiders get bored.
Yeah, and bored spiders are just the worst.
Everyone in the audience is just kind of like nodding in agreement.
He's like,
you know?
This is hour 1 of a 40,000 hour speech. And then he's like, okay, let's turn to slide 1 of 10,000 or something like that.
Michael shows up on stage, pretending to be Vicky, pretending to be Michael.
Yes, this was Michael's plan. Michael's going to pretend this is the plan he had. He's going to pretend to be Vicky in the Michael suit. And he's going to pretend that Jason is another demon in a Jason suit.
Yes. And they want to get the location of Janet so they can, like, torture her using Jason.
Supposedly.
And, yeah. But then Sean's like, oh no, this is a great opportunity. Like, we'll do this on stage. And
yeah.
So they bring Janet out on stage, and Janet initially reacts to Michael. It's funny because she's like, oh, you're gonna wear that all the time, you reek, or something. And it's like, Sean had just said the exact same thing before. Michael's like, why doesn't everybody keep saying that? But yeah, so with Michael, she doesn't piece it together that's the real Michael right away, but when she sees Jason, she, like, immediately pieces together that that's the real Jason.
Right.
And they even have the little moment where he says, like, hey, girl, or something, and she says, not a girl,
yeah.
With a big smile.
And then she starts crying, and Sean starts laughing, and everybody in the room starts laughing, and then...
Yeah, they misinterpret what's going on.
Yeah, they misinterpret what's going on. They think the torture is happening. And then Michael is just like, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and escort Janet back to her cell ourselves so we can continue the torture there. And then Sean basically says, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And as soon as he says that, Vicky in the Michael suit jumps on the stage.
Yeah, like having not seen any of this, like just comes out from backstage herself.
Yes.
Kind of basically do the same thing that Michael did, like crash the speech and show up and, to introduce this concept, like to take over the thing. The same thing that Michael was basically doing, but instead of like Michael's ploy, it's what she's actually planning to do. So she's not, when she jumps on stage, she's not doing it knowing that Michael's there.
Yeah.
Or that, anything else is going on.
She doesn't know until she gets on stage and she sees Michael.
Yeah. And then, there's like another guard up on stage and they say like, oh, that's the real Michael. She proves it by showing that she's Vicky underneath. And there's like another guy who's gonna like, go and grab Michael, and Michael's like, he's like, I don't want to do it, but he's all, I'll use this demon exploder on you.
Yeah, use this.
Which is the one that bad Janet made to get rid of, Glenn. To trick them into getting rid of Glenn, basically, in the last episode.
Yes, to trick them.
And they're like, Sean's like, such a ridiculous thing doesn't, and boom, blows up the demon. Sean's kind of shocked. People in the audience the demons in the audience don't even really realize what's going on. They think it's all like part of the show. So Vicky's being threatened with this. The one demon was blown to goo with this. And they end up trying to, like, they're going to escape. And instead of like all the demons there capturing them, they're just like applauding because they think it's all part of the show. And Sean's like, you idiots! This isn't part of the show. This is really happening. But it doesn't matter. They're getting away. And that's kind of like their storyline in this episode.
Yes.
The main story really going on, though, is that now that they know that Janet's gone, and now that Michael and Jason have taken off, like, they need Derek to, like, manage Janet's duties. Because he has kind of like the same abilities, he's just not as smart at using them.
Yes.
To manage all these people, because all the people besides our main characters and the test subjects, they're all creations of Janet. They're all just like, and they're kind of dumb. They have to be like carefully managed by Janet. But she's not there, and bad Janet was kind of doing that job even when she had taken over Janet's role, just because she didn't want to expose the game, because then the judge would reset it.
Right.
So there's nobody there now to manage all the people. And so everything's kind of going wrong with that. Derek's trying to do it, but he can't really do that great of a job of it. So they come up with a scheme to kind of get them all away from all those people. They say like, oh, we're going to send everybody to like things you would do when you're on Earth. It's Earth Day, but just not as lame as on Earth. And they're like, okay, this group you're going to do gardening, and this group you're going to do this. And then he goes to like the group with the test subjects, and he's like, Eleanor's like, and this group you're going to go to a lake house, and you're going to get massages and do, it's like just basically like you're going to have like a little luxury trip. And so like, oh, okay, so they all go, and Tahani's kind of like running this trip, like creating like something that's going to be this luxurious trip for all of them, except Chidi doesn't show up because he's afraid of water.
He's afraid of everything.
Yeah. So, Simone ends up telling Tahani this, and Tahani kind of freaks out. It's like, oh, you guys take care of this. I'm gonna head back. She comes back into town, and, like, all the people under Derek's control are basically just, like, bumping into each other.
They're just acting.
They're just completely useless.
Yeah, they're completely useless. Tahani is having a meltdown because Eleanor's telling her that she has to entertain the humans, and you basically do what she does, be a hostess, and Tahani is like having this thing where she's like, that's all I'm good for, isn't it? Just to be a hostess. Like, I want to do more in the good place.
Mm-hmm.
But
she wants to find more meaning.
She wants to find more
and become better.
And so she's not happy that Eleanor is basically telling her to be a hostess for these humans.
But she ends up convincing Derek to basically reset himself a bunch of times, because every time he resets, he gets a little bit smarter.
Yes.
So Derek goes off to kind of reset himself a bunch of time, but this means like basically like all of the people that Janet created, they're just like dead.
Yeah.
Like if you just walked into town, it would look like a massacre.
Yeah,
happened.
exactly. After Derek resets himself, as soon as he falls over, all the people in the town fall over.
So they have to, this is all like, while this is all happening, Eleanor's trying to convince Chidi that he's, like, oh yeah, I knew that you wouldn't want to go on this trip, because you don't like water and you're afraid of everything. But we created a special thing for you, it's all in this room. There's a puzzle and you have to find all the pieces.
Eleanor's trying to not let Chidi see all the chaos that's happening because the other humans that actually went, they're not near this, so they're not seeing any of this stuff. But Chidi is in his house, so like she's trying to like make sure he doesn't see what's going on. And I love it because she gives Chidi, she's like, okay, like I have a puzzle for you, and the answer to the puzzle is like the ultimate secret of the universe. And I love Chidi because she's like, oh, I love puzzles. She's like,
but this is also like there's so much work, it's almost like homework. Yes. So it's a double win.
Yes.
So that she keeps bringing up these, like, mundane things to keep him busy, and the more mundane she's making it, the more excited he's getting.
Yeah, the more mundane it is, the more excited he's getting.
But then she realizes at a certain point that, like, this isn't going to help him, that he needs to overcome his fear of connecting to people and doing things, and it's just his fear of everything in general. And so she decides, like, she kind of gives him a lecture about how he needs to end up. The real mystery is to lead him into connecting with the other people.
Right.
And so she kind of, takes him blindfolded to the location where the other people are, walking through all the, randomly moving around people. There's a great part where Tahani's there too, and they knock out one of the people that's just kind of like in the way, and he falls over on the ground, and you just hear like the kerplunk of him falling over. And Chidi's like, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's a unicorn dying. And he's like, oh my god. And she's like, oh, did I say unicorn? No, it was a regular horse that was stabbed in the head. He's like, oh my god.
I love it because the one part where she's like realizes it's time to take Chidi out, Chidi has like these things, and he's like, am I done with the riddle? And Eleanor's just like, no, there's 4,000 clues. You only found 5.
Yeah. So there's lots of like funny stuff in there. But that's the episode basically.
Yeah, that was the episode basically.
So next week we're going to be talking about the next episode of Mr. Robot and the next episode of The Good Place. So stay tuned for that. But until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. So on Friday, October 25th, 2019, The Kaminsky Method started on Netflix, or returned to Netflix, I should say. Then this Sunday, October 27th, 2019, Miss Fletcher, the miniseries, comes to HBO, and Silicon Valley returns to HBO. Then on Wednesday, October 30th, 2019, Baroness von Sketch Show returns to IFC. On Friday, November 1st, 2019, American Son comes to Netflix. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan comes to Amazon Prime. And Apple TV debuts, Apple TV Plus. So you get the new shows Dickinson, For All Mankind, The Morning Show, and See. So if you're an Apple fan, that's a big night for you.
Yikes.
Then on Sunday, November 3rd, 2019, Kidding returns to Showtime. On Monday, November 4th, 2019, His Dark Materials debuts on HBO. We talked about that back in the next Game of Thrones podcast specials we did. One of the big fantasy shows coming up. On Sunday, November 10th, 2019, Dublin Murders comes to Starz, and Shameless returns to Showtime. So that's it. Thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best